Today we got Coach Joe Bruneel with us. He is a young and upcoming defense coordinator at Albert Einstein High School in Maryland. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Coach, for people who don't know you, can you kind of just start with kind of your background and kind of how you got to where you are in your career, how long you've been coaching?
Okay, so with me, I am really just someone who just loves football immensely. I played football growing up, played youth football, played high school football. I didn't play football in college, um, but my buddy had gotten a job coaching, and he became the JV head coach of my alma mater, Einstein, in Kensington, Maryland, which is about 15 minutes outside the District of Columbia. He got the JV head coaching job there, and he brought me on staff. He was like, I know Joe loves football, and I'm going to bring him on staff. And so my first year was 2014, and I was there at Einstein for a year, and then I went to another school. I got a chance to coach with multiple time state title winning coach in Dan McCosey, who around Maryland people know his name. Probably not around the country, but around Maryland people know his name. He was a credible coach. I coached with him at Kennedy High School in Silver Spring, Maryland. And that was such a great opportunity because he just had such great attention to detail. And I would compare his attention to detail to that of Vince Lombardi or Don Shula. And so I really learned football, really got to know football and really started to understand the game once I started coaching with him. Now, unfortunately, it was kind of a sad story because about a week after I took the job with Kennedy, he found out that he had stage 4 cancer.
Oh, shit.
So it was almost, pretty much death sentence, which was pretty sad. But we coached that 1 year with him, and I learned so much football. And I ended up going back to Einstein after that, and was the JV defensive coordinator for a couple years at Einstein. In my first year, we had the best. I know, JV. Who cares about JV records? But my first year back, we had the best JV team in Einstein football history. And I had coached. Then the next year I was at DC again, and the next year I became JV head coach. And then the year after that, this past year, 2019, I was fortunate enough to be the D coordinator on varsity. And we had a pretty good season. We won our first playoff game in program history. And so, I was just very blessed to have a very talented team and team that listened and worked hard and liked being around each other. And, I was fortunate enough to be able to coach all of them.
Well,
So that's where I am to now.
Well, that's awesome, Coach, and I mean that's sad to hear that one of your former bosses unfortunately died of cancer.
Yeah.
I mean that's a horrible thing, and that's I think something we all kind of need to be aware of is
Yeah,
make sure we
get
take
a
care of our health.
colonoscopy, guys.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
I mean that's not a joke, and I mean
Yeah.
unfortunately stuff like that happens, and it's unfortunate. But kind of going into your let's start with I mean you guys run a 3-4 defense.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you prefer 3-4 defense? What do you like about it?
So what I got to go back to, being a kid when I first started watching football, and for me, my love of football started with the NFL. I played youth football, but really where I started to love football was NFL. I'm a huge Green Bay Packers fan. And when I started watching NFL, there was only one team that ran the 3-4, and it was the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I loved the way they played defense. And I remember there was one season where they were just so dominant with the 3-4. And I was like, why is nobody else running this? And so there's something about the spacing of the 3 down linemen of the 4 linebackers, how you can kind of shift those linebackers around. There's something that just kind of spoke to me. And, then you see Belichick install 3-4 with the Patriots, and they won 2 Super Bowls in back-to-back years. I think that first year they were base 4-3. So really that love of 3-4 started when I was a kid. watching the NFL. And then my first couple of years coaching, we started off with a 3-4. And, when I was coaching with Dan McCosey, I was taught the 3-4. Now, it was that, old style 3-4 of just two gapping, the guys are doing this.
Yeah.
They're doing that. They were reading where they were, shooting your hands out, thrusting your hips through, got your thumbs up strike, and you're reading where the head goes. And you're just fighting the pressure. And what we would do is we would have all three of our D linemen, they would just fight to pressure. And, I got to say, that's it's a good way to play 3-4, but it's hard on the D lineman because first of all, you got to be strong as heck to do that. To be able to bench press and then read and then get off, D linemen they like to slant. They like to play one gap. They like to make plays. And you're not necessarily going to get that when you're doing this. So, the thing was, I learned that style, that sort of static 3-down style. And then I realized, what? I watched when I saw what Wade Phillips did with Denver that year. They won the Super Bowl because they were just one gap. Most of the D-linemen were one gap, and they kind of had the ability to get upfield. They kind of had the ability to be playmakers. So it was almost kind of like a 4-3-3-4 hybrid because they were playing one gaps. They were playing, a 5, a shade, and a 3. But they were still, a solid 3-4 personnel out there. So that stood out to me so much. And so I started to do a little bit more slanting. But, I always did one thing I've always done was head up nose. He's playing two gaps, and then have two D linemen to the side of him. They're either probably in 4 eyes playing B gap and what we call today, the tight front. And so that's kind of where everyone is right now. Everyone's playing the tight front, and I'm right there with them. But I have run all different styles of 3-4. And that's the great thing about 3-4. It's so flexible. You can do. When I say I run a 3-4, that can mean so many different things. Yeah. Are you a slanting team? Are you a static front where everyone's playing two gaps? Is one guy playing two gaps? Is your nose lagging? Is your nose fighting to pressure? And so, are you a base drop 8? Are you a base 4-man rush? There's so many different ways to play 3-4. So I just love that versatility of it. And it's always just been something that I just felt comfortable running.
Now, I curiosity, because I don't know Maryland football well. I'm not going to sit here and pretend. We talked a little bit about before how our OC was in Maryland for a while to start his career. What do you guys see a lot of? Like, every state's a little different. Like, Texas, you think, when I talk to Texas people, they're a lot of 10 and 11 personnel. They're 4 or 5 wide receivers. They're running air raid. They're running RPOs and spread concepts. You come to Ohio, you kind of see more gap concepts, or heck, you still see teams run old school wing T like we run wing T offensively. Mm-hmm. What do you guys see a lot of?
What we see most of, in Montgomery County, which is the county directly above the District of Columbia, we get a lot of 10 personnel spread. I just think the reason why is because we have so many fast receiver types. And if teams aren't in 10 personnel, they're usually 21P. They're usually, playing, running power, counter, trap, ISO, those types of gap scheme teams. And then, but occasionally you'll find some, like for example, in the playoffs these past year, you'll find we played a flex bone triple option team. So, and here's the thing, it was the first time I've ever coached against a flex bone triple option team, but it was a great learning experience.
Oh yeah.
And I really felt like I kind of learned a lot of football that week preparing for them. Now, we didn't win the game. It was just the second round of the playoffs. So, hopefully we face them again and we can, and I get another shot at it. But it was, we have a lot of the spread. We have basically, the offense I learned growing, coaching in Maryland was the 21 personnel, power and counter and ISO. Now, the thing about Maryland is, or at least in Montgomery County, we don't call power, we call it TED, meaning tight end down, or that's just been my experience. We don't call ISO, we call it tummy. And I don't know if that's just a Maryland thing. I don't know if other parts of the country call it that. I don't know if you ever heard of that before.
I can say I've not, but every area has I've learned that doing this. Like everybody's got a little bit of terminology on what they either call a play or a certain block, or like it's a regional thing usually.
Yeah, and we definitely have the RPOs around here. And you're gonna have to have answers for that, and going into your game plan, and you have to have. The thing is, you got to have answers for all those things, and that's what I try and going to every single game. I try to have answers for everything, and then I have to think about how would this OC counter me, and I have to think about, well, if this OC does that, how am I going to respond? And that's usually the night before the game. Usually the night before game, I'm visualizing. Okay, well, I do this. The OC is going to adjust like this. Then how do I counter that? But kind of getting back to what you asked. We see it's mostly 10 personnel, 21 personnel sometimes, but and then a little bit of 11P. But for the most part, we get 4 wide receivers.
Okay.
A lot.
All right. So you guys are more than Texas oriented than we are. I mean, like I said, our state's still very gap scheme.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just our state. Even out of the gun.
I think what it is just if you go to different parts of the state, you'll find different styles of play. So I got to do a better job of going outside Montgomery County and going to different parts of the state and seeing how other teams play. So I'm looking forward to that at some point, but.
Awesome.
For now, I just know Montgomery County schools real well.
Now, obviously you mentioned it a little bit, but how much do you adjust your 3-4 system year to year based off your personnel, or do you try to keep the nuts and bolts fairly the same? Because
That's a great question. I would say, here's how I kind of work is, I'm like so many other coaches in that I love clinics. I love learning new stuff. And so what I'll always do, the first thing I'm always going to do is adjust my scheme to the players I have. And I'm going to do the best job I can to put my players in the best position to succeed. Who cares? That's a boring answer. Whatever. That's, that goes without saying almost. But I would say every single year that you go to clinics, you pick up stuff. And I always kind of add stuff from a clinic each year. And this year, if we've had one thing, we've had lots of time to study stuff. So I've studied so much. So, there's lots of things I can add. I'm not saying I'm going to add any of this stuff, but I'm fascinated right now by the 3 safety Iowa State dime. I just love, I think to me, that's a genius scheme.
I agree. Outside of the state of Texas, though, I question how applicable it is to the high school. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I do not know. Because like I said, I've had Runda on this channel talk twice on it, and he does a fantastic job with it, Division III college level, and it is fantastic. I love his presentations. He does a great job with it. Iowa State does a great job with it. A couple other colleges do, and I think it's very applicable in college with how much the ball is thrown.
I agree with you. I agree. I think it's probably that sweet spot for it is probably college.
Yeah.
And then, in Texas where, you got quarterbacks like you got Andy Dalton, you got a Patrick Mahomes coming, Drew Brees and Nick Foles coming out of Texas schools. And, it's probably pretty applicable there. But in other parts of the country, it's
in your state, it might be more applicable in your state than ours, just because you guys see, and we had this conversation before we came on, like, you have some speed in your state, like receiver-wise, athletes that come out of your state. You also see a lot more 10 and 11 personnel, whereas I see a lot more 21 or 12 personnel in our state at times, even out of the gun. Like, we have teams in our league that are spread, but they're spread power. It's the three.
Let me ask you this: when teams are in 21 personnel, what's most defenses adjusting to that? Are they in a 4-3 under front? Are they rotated down to a single high?
Yeah, it mostly at that point for us. And a lot of teams in our state, usually a lot of it becomes either like if they're like either a 4-3 under, if they're a 4-2-5, it turns almost more into a 4-4 cover 3.
Yeah.
Or what a lot of teams do, their 3-4 becomes essentially a 5-2 or a 5-3. They'll roll that guy down, and it'll be 5-3 cover 1, 5-3 cover. Like a lot of that varies, but we probably our state, at least our region, is more 3-3, 4-2-5, or 3-4. I don't see. There's a couple 4-3s, but that's not as prevalent. Like when I was at DC, my first year I was 4-2-5. Year 2 I was 4-4. At my first 2 years at DC, when I came here and became a co-DC, we flipped between a 3-4 and a 4. We were multiple.
I think a lot of schools are multiple, and from what I see a lot around here is a lot of schools around here like to run 4-down single high, and I can understand why, because the thing with the 3-4 is you always got to determine where that fourth rusher is coming from. Yeah. 4 down, you're not worrying about that. And the great thing about a 4-4 single high is you have either side of the field, you got an adjuster to formation to either side of the field. And you can guarantee yourself 6 in the box. So we see a lot of 4-down single high here. And I've run that plenty, so I'm not bashing at all. Yeah. I've just, I have my preference is 3 down.
Well, that year I switched to 4-4. I mean, we pretty much ran cover 3 all year. We ran I had cover 1 in, and we had like an inverted 2 that I ran in one game. But we forced 25 turnovers that year. Like, I 18 interceptions, 7 fumble recoveries. Like, it was so simple. You got very efficient at it, and it was smaller school ball, so you can kind of get away with some things that you can't necessarily when you're in a bigger school like I am now. But it's like I said, I in a perfect world, I'm an odd front guy in a perfect world. Yeah. But I think you know as I do, and that's why I kind of asked that question is how much are you going to adjust your system to your personnel? Like I'm not saying switch from the 3-4 to a 4-3, but you might adjust instead of being a slant in front this year, you might be more of a 2 gap, or you might be more tight than instead of head ups. I mean, you might rush your boundary linebacker more than your field. Like there's factors in that based off your personnel each year.
Yeah. I mean, like the beautiful thing about the 3-4 is I think it's diverse enough that you don't have to switch to a 4 down to accompany your personnel. You can do. There's so many different variations of 3-4 that you can accompany your personnel and still have you still use all the same language. You don't have to start all over with a 4 down. And the beautiful thing is we of course play 4 down too. Like that we definitely had more than our share of snaps last year when we were 4 down. So we're definitely we're in that world too.
Now I kind of want to get into like play calling and scouting. Mm-hmm. Like what do you focus on, and then how do you build that for yourself?
Well, so scouting, the best advice that I have gotten for scouting is, and I learned this from the great Dan McCosey, who I was able to coach with for a year at Kennedy, is, he said, here's the thing. You see these teams run all these different plays. Shut down their top 3 plays. Find their top 3 plays and just practice. And you're going to want to practice against everything, but that's really the thing that you want to just try and worry about their top 3 plays. And so that's I've kind of carried that philosophy with me because, honestly, there's schools around here that run so much stuff. And, that's intimidating, but at the same time, you have to realize what's their bread and butter. What do they do best? And if you can shut that down, you can kind of make them play left-handed, because they may not listen. They may, maybe they don't want to play 10 personnel. Maybe they're really best out of 21 personnel, but they end up playing 10 personnel because you're shutting down their 21P package. You're shutting down their gap scheme runs. So just take away. I would say my philosophy is just take away what they do best. As far as play calling goes, when it get a little bit, if you watch Star Trek, I'm going a little.
You're fine. Go nerdy. Have at it.
Okay, I'm getting nerdy here. So if you watch the original version of Star Trek, with William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy, so you had Captain Kirk, right? So Captain Kirk was the center of the ship. He was the captain, right? So on one hand, you had McCoy, who was the doctor. McCoy represented emotion. Okay, so he would always encourage Captain Kirk to do things based on emotion. And then you had, on the other hand, you had Spock, who was pure logic, right? So Spock was pure logic, and he would always encourage Captain Kirk to make decisions based off of what was logically the sound thing to do. So Captain Kirk was always right in the middle, right at that intersection of logic and emotion. And for me, play calling, whether it's for offense or defense or special teams, it lives at the intersection of logic and emotion. So I have to figure out something play calling wise that logically fits the situation. Yet I also have to figure out something that emotionally, maybe my guy right now, maybe this linebacker, he's better off blitzing than he is dropping. Maybe my D lineman, maybe he doesn't want to be static and play two gaps right now. Maybe he wants to slant and make a play. And so I got to figure out something that fits the situation. So I've just told myself over the years, play calling, intersection of logic and emotion, something that logically fits the situation, something that emotionally fits the situation. And so I always try to remind myself of that.
Well, that's great. I like the Star Trek reference, even though I'm more of a Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
But
I'm a Star Trek guy, sorry.
No, that's fine. Each of us come up with what we got. I just remember watching Return of the Jedi over and over again growing up. So hey, that's fine with it. Use what you gotta do to motivate yourself, and it kind of works for you. No, but that's great. Where do we want to go next? But out of curiosity, because I've been thinking this whole time. What is that? What is that behind you? One, is that a puzzle? Two, what is that?
This is a picture of, I think, New York City in 1920s.
Okay.
So this is the Flatiron Building there. This is the building that's, it's like that. So it's just a pleasant black, backdrop. So it works.
So
actually, in my apartment, it's just a nice backdrop.
Actually, I know where I wanted to go next with this, and I was thinking about it. It's like, now obviously you're watching YouTube and other clinics, but when you are studying defenses, and who are you watching? Who are your kind of main sources of innovation? Whose film are you like breaking down when you want to get ideas or look at more 3-4 stuff?
Well, the first guy I'm going to mention is actually not a 3-4 guy, but someone who I've always loved watching was Michigan State, Mark D'Antonio, and Narduzzi. Those guys with the over front with the quarter scheme, I just loved it. I felt like it was so simple, and those guys were playing so fast. And the first time I remember, I want to say Michigan State was playing Ohio State, and it was like a 4th and 1. And this is when Monte Nicholson was at Michigan State, and he stops Zeke Elliott. He's 9 yards deep. He stops Zeke Elliott on a zone play that he bounces, and he's able to stop him 4th and 1. And I'm like, oh my God, these safeties are playing so fast and playing so downhill. And that when I saw the way how fast Michigan State could play on defense, I was like, I love watching these guys. So, D'Antonio now, now he's retired, but I just love watching. And I guess now Narduzzi is one of the guys who I really enjoy watching. Of course, Dave Aranda. Dave Aranda, I think, is going back to his Wisconsin days, watching that scheme and again, how fast those guys were, how fast everyone plays, and how he can get like matchups, and how he can, and he's great. I've got to watch Baylor. I haven't really watched Baylor yet. I haven't watched a lot of college football this year, so I got to sit down and watch some Baylor. The other guy, Kirby Smart is up there. Of course, I gotta say Saban. Saban's up there. And then I think last, App State. App State right now, and then also Army. Because I think their App State's DC is now at Army, and they play such a simple scheme. They kind of play those reduction three. They play like that reduction style 3-4, and I love watching them. They, watching Army's opener, I got to see that entire game, and just watching how, again, the thing for me is how fast everyone can play. So there's this misconception that, if you have that if the scheme is simple, that there's different ways to exploit it. Well, you can make a simple scheme that has lots of answers. And I always felt like that was that was the App State guys, and that was what I saw from Army. So those are the people who I probably watched. Army, App State, definitely LSU. Now that Baylor, now that Dave Aranda's there.
Yeah, I was about to say LSU's back to 4-3 and.
Right. Well, LSU has struggled, and then the other guy is not Wilcox. Jim Leonard at Wisconsin.
Yeah, Leonard's doing a fantastic job there. I will give him credit. That was a fantastic hire by them. And
yeah, he's great.
I mean,
great.
One of my buddies was talking to him this offseason, and he's like, him and Don Brown just do some amazing stuff, which is.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. That was the other guy who I should have mentioned was Don Brown.
Oh no, you're
Don
good.
Brown.
Now, before we go, because I do have to ask a question. Now, since you do live in the state of Maryland, does that by default make you a Maryland Terrapin fan, or do you have a little bit more sense, and do you have a different team that you root for?
Here's the deal. My brother is a Terp. I kind of, I've always rooted for the Terps, but I don't really have an official college football team. If I root for teams, it's going to be the Packers. But with college football, I usually just kind of like to flip around and watch everyone. College football for me is not so much about rooting interest. It's more about I just love to watch scheme, and I love to watch players play well. So, I kind of root for the Terps. I root for Wisconsin. I root for Michigan State. I root for Colorado, Iowa State. But, for the most part, college football. I'm more just like to watch scheme.
Now, I do have to follow that up with, why are you a Packers fan? And please don't tell me it's just because you grew up watching Brett Favre.
Well, no. The reason why it's not Brett Favre. Both my folks are from the Midwest. So
okay.
my dad is from Detroit. My mom is from Chicago. All right, so why should I be a Packers fan? Well, my dad had a job where he worked part-time in Milwaukee. So he would go up to Milwaukee each week. And here's the thing. My favorite player growing up was Reggie White.
Okay,
Reggie White is the reason why I started playing football. He's my favorite athlete of all time.
That is a more than perfectly acceptable answer.
Yeah.
On the arguably one of the greatest pass rushers of all time. So
one of the greatest. He's the best.
Well, there's people that are going to argue Lawrence Taylor and.
Right. Well, Lawrence Taylor is he's an outside linebacker. So there's going to be some snaps where he's going to be matched up against a running back.
Let's be honest. Lawrence Taylor wasn't dropping anymore. Lawrence Taylor was there to rush the passer. That's just how that's going to go.
I consider those two different positions. The 4-down defensive ends and the outside linebackers, 3-4, two different things. And the other thing about the Packers is, I love the passion. I'm super passionate about football, and I went to an XFL game this past year, and I saw the DC Defenders, and of course I was wearing my Packers stuff just because I like to show off my Packers things. And a guy turns to me and he says, "Why are there so many Packer fans here? Is there some sort of connection between the XFL and the DC Defenders, and the Green Bay Packers?" Excuse me. And I said, "No, it's just Packer fans tend to love football." And I think there's just a love of football amongst Packer fans. Now, if you're a Bears fan, you're saying "Oh, who cares?" But I've always just felt that.
Well,
there's just a love. We love football, and I love football.
Well, Coach, it's been great talking to you. If any coaches want to get a hold of Coach and talk a little bit more 3-4 with him, kind of a little bit more depth off screen, his Twitter handle will be in the bio. Please reach out to him. Coach is a good dude. Coach got back to me quickly. They don't play to the spring, correct? Is that my understanding about Maryland?
We should be good to go in the spring, so hopefully that happens, and so looking forward to that.
Well, Coach, thank you again, and I hope you stay safe and stay healthy, and enjoy the rest of your whatever this weird, what I mean.
Whatever this period is, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Thanks, Coach.
My pleasure.